Welcome back to the shadows, my friends. This is Mr. Shadow's Stories, where the darkness speaks and the truth is far more terrifying than fiction. Tonight, we venture into places that should be safe, quiet sanctuaries of knowledge and learning. But as you're about to discover, some libraries hold secrets that were never meant to be catalogued. 4 night staff members, 4 encounters with the unexplainable, 4 reasons why you might never look at your local library the same way again. So dim the lights, lock your doors, and prepare yourself, because these stories are all too real. Story 1: The Reader in the Archives. Our first story comes from a woman named Patricia, who worked as a night archivist at a university library in Massachusetts for over 15 years. Patricia was responsible for organizing and preserving rare books and manuscripts in the basement archives, a job that required long, solitary hours in the oldest part of the building. The archives were built in 1897, and the air down there always felt heavy, thick with the weight of time and forgotten stories. Patricia told me she never minded the isolation. In fact, she preferred it. The silence allowed her to focus, to carefully handle centuries-old documents without distraction. But there were rules she followed religiously. Never stay past 3 in the morning, always keep the main corridor lights on, and most importantly, never enter the restricted section alone after midnight. These weren't official rules, mind you. They were unwritten guidelines passed down from one night archivist to another, warnings whispered during shift changes, accompanied by nervous glances and uncomfortable silences. For 14 years, Patricia followed these rules without question. Then came the night of November 7th. It was a Tuesday, unseasonably cold for early November. Patricia had been working on cataloging a collection of personal letters from the 1840s when she heard it, the distinct sound of pages turning. Not the whisper of careful handling, but rapid, aggressive page turning, as if someone was frantically searching for something. The sound was coming from the restricted section. Patricia froze, her hands trembling as she set down the delicate letter she'd been examining. The restricted section housed the library's most valuable and fragile items, including several texts on occult practices that had been donated by a controversial collector in the 1920s. Access required special authorization, and Patricia was the only person scheduled to work that night. She checked her watch, 2:47 in the morning, still before her 3 o'clock rule, but the sound was undeniable. Someone or something was in the restricted section. Patricia made her way down the corridor, her footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The restricted section was behind a locked metal door at the far end of the archives. As she approached, she could see that the door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the crack. She knew she had locked it. She always locked it. The page turning continued, faster now, almost violent. Patricia's rational mind told her to call security, to leave the archives, and let someone else handle it. But 15 years of professional pride pushed her forward. These were her books, her responsibility. She pushed the door open. The restricted section was pitch black, except for a single reading lamp in the far corner, illuminating a figure hunched over one of the tables. Patricia's breath caught in her throat. The figure was wearing what appeared to be old-fashioned clothing, a long dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat. She couldn't see a face. "Excuse me," Patricia called out, her voice shakier than she would have liked. "The library is closed. You need to leave." The page turning stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, slowly, the figure's head began to turn toward her. But it kept turning and turning, rotating far beyond what any human neck could manage, until it had turned completely around, 180 degrees. There was no face, just smooth, blank skin where features should have been. Patricia ran. She didn't remember closing the door, didn't remember grabbing her things, didn't remember calling security from the parking lot. But she remembered the sound that followed her. Not footsteps, but the continuous, relentless sound of pages turning, growing louder and louder until she burst through the emergency exit. Security found nothing. The restricted section was locked tight, just as it should have been. The reading lamp was off, and most disturbing of all, the book on the table, a 19th century grimoire about summoning spirits, was open to a page with a single handwritten note in the margin. They read us, too. Patricia never worked another night shift. She transferred to day operations and eventually left the library entirely. But she told me something that still haunts me. A week after her encounter, she was researching the library's history and found a photograph from 1923 showing the original night librarian, a man in a long dark coat and wide-brimmed hat. According to the records, he had died in the restricted section under mysterious causes, found slumped over a book with no apparent cause of death. The book he was reading, the same grimoire Patricia had found open that night. Story 2: The Children's Section. Our second story takes us to a public library in rural Ohio, where a night custodian named Marcus experienced something that made him question everything he thought he knew about reality. Marcus had worked at the Millbrook Public Library for 7 years, always taking the night shift because it paid better and allowed him to attend community college during the day. His duties were simple: clean the building after closing, ensure all windows and doors were secure, and set the alarm before leaving at 11 p.m. The Millbrook Library was a beautiful old building, constructed in 1952 with large windows and a classic architectural design. But it had one peculiar feature that had always unsettled Marcus. The children's section was completely separate from the main building, connected only by a long hallway with windows overlooking an interior courtyard. The children's section had always felt different. The temperature was always colder there, even in summer. The lights flickered more frequently, and there was a smell, faint but distinct, like old paper and something sweet that Marcus could never quite identify. Still, it was just a room. Marcus was a practical man who didn't believe in ghosts or supernatural nonsense. That was until the night he heard the children laughing. It was a Wednesday in March, around 9:30 in the evening. Marcus was mopping the main reading area when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of children's laughter coming from the children's section. Not just one or two children, but many, as if an entire class was gathered there, playing and giggling. Marcus set down his mop and walked toward the hallway. The library had been closed for over an hour. He had personally checked every room, every bathroom, every closet. The building was empty. As he approached the children's section, the laughter grew louder. He could hear individual voices now, high-pitched and cheerful, mixed with the sound of small feet running across the carpet. It sounded like a party, like pure childhood joy.
Marcus pushed open the door. The room was empty, completely, utterly empty. But the laughter continued all around him, as if invisible children were playing a game he couldn't see. He could hear them running past him, feel the slight breeze of their movement, but there was nothing there. Then the whispering started. At first, it was indistinct, just a murmur beneath the laughter, but gradually it became clearer. Multiple voices, young voices, all whispering the same thing. Play with us, stay with us, read to us. Marcus backed toward the door, his heart pounding. As he reached for the handle, every book on every shelf, hundreds of children's books, simultaneously fell to the floor, not tumbling, not sliding, but flying off the shelves as if thrown by invisible hands. The laughter stopped. In the sudden silence, Marcus heard something that froze his blood. A single child's voice, clearer than the others, speaking directly into his ear. "We've been waiting so long for someone to read to us. Don't leave. Please don't leave like the others." Marcus ran. He didn't stop running until he was in his car. Doors locked, engine started. He called his supervisor from the parking lot and quit on the spot, saying there was a family emergency. He never went back, not even to collect his final paycheck. But Marcus did his research. He had to know what he'd experienced. What he found made him wish he'd left it alone. In 1967, the children's section had been the site of a tragedy. A young librarian had been reading to a group of 15 children during a summer program when a carbon monoxide leak from the heating system had silently filled the room. The librarian and all 15 children had died, found peacefully sitting in a circle as if they'd simply fallen asleep during story time. The library had been extensively renovated after the incident and the heating system completely replaced, but workers had reported strange occurrences during the renovation. Tools going missing, children's handprints appearing on dusty surfaces, and always the faint sound of laughter when they worked late into the evening. Marcus told me he still sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night, hearing that voice in his ear. Don't leave like the others. He wonders how many other night workers had experienced the same thing, how many had run away just like him, too frightened to speak of what they'd witnessed.
Story 3: The Floor That Doesn't Exist. Jennifer was a night security guard at a downtown library in Seattle, a modern building completed in 2004 with state-of-the-art security systems and 6 floors of public space. She loved her job, the quiet, the sense of protecting something important, the meditative nature of walking the same routes every night. But Jennifer had a problem. Her security schedule required her to check every floor, every hour, including the 7th floor. The building only had 6 floors. The first time she noticed the 7th floor button in the elevator, Jennifer thought it was a mistake, perhaps a manufacturing error. She pressed it out of curiosity, and the elevator rose past the 6th floor, the digital display showing 7. The doors opened to a floor that shouldn't exist. It looked like a library from another era. Dark wood shelves, green reading lamps, leather chairs that appeared ancient. The air smelled of must and decay, and the lighting came from sources Jennifer couldn't identify, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Jennifer stepped out cautiously. Her radio crackled with static, and her flashlight flickered despite having fresh batteries.
The shelves were filled with books, but when she tried to read the spines, the titles seemed to shift and change, never quite coming into focus. That's when she noticed the people. They were sitting in the reading chairs, scattered throughout the floor, absolutely motionless. Men and women in clothing from different eras, Victorian dresses, 1920s suits, 1970s casual wear. All of them were reading books, their eyes moving across the pages, but never blinking, never shifting position, never acknowledging her presence. Jennifer's training told her to investigate, to check if these people needed help, to determine how they'd accessed a floor that didn't officially exist. But every instinct screamed at her to get back in the elevator and leave. She compromised. "Excuse me," she called out. "The library is closed. You all need to leave." As one, every head turned toward her. Their eyes were wrong, completely black, no whites, no pupils, just solid black orbs that reflected her flashlight beam like mirrors. One of them spoke, a man in a 1950s suit. His mouth didn't move, but Jennifer heard his voice clearly, as if he was speaking directly into her mind. "We can't leave. We're part of the collection now." "The collection?" Jennifer whispered. A woman in a Victorian dress stood up, her movements stiff and unnatural. "Run, dear, run before it notices you, before you become part of the collection too." The elevator doors started to close, but Jennifer could see the floor changing, the readers standing now, moving toward her with jerky, puppet-like movements, and behind them, in the shadows between the shelves, something larger was stirring, something that seemed to be made of darkness itself, with eyes that glowed like dying stars. The doors closed. Jennifer hammered the ground floor button repeatedly, her hands shaking. When she finally emerged into the lobby, she checked the elevator panel. There was no 7th floor button. It had vanished. Jennifer went to her supervisor and reported what she'd seen, expecting to be laughed at or sent for a psychological evaluation. Instead, her supervisor's face went pale. He took her to his office, closed the door, and pulled out a locked file cabinet. Inside were reports, dozens of reports from previous security guards, going back to 2004 when the building opened. All of them described the same thing, a 7th floor that appeared and disappeared, readers who couldn't leave, and something dark that collected them. "We don't talk about it," her supervisor said. "The company that owns the building has made that very clear. But there are rules. If you see the 7th floor button, don't press it. If you accidentally end up there, leave immediately, and never ever go there after 2 in the morning. "Why?" Jennifer asked. Her supervisor showed her the last page in the file. It was a missing persons report from 2006. A security guard had vanished during his night shift. His last radio call was logged at 2:15 in the morning. He said, "I'm on the 7th floor. There's someone who needs help. They're trapped. I'm going to—" The transmission had ended there. The guard was never found. But according to the report Jennifer was reading, another guard had gone to the 7th floor 2 years later and seen someone new among the readers, a man in a security uniform, sitting perfectly still, reading a book, his eyes solid black. Jennifer quit 2 weeks later, but she told me something that still keeps me awake some nights. Before she left, she went back to the building during the day when it was full of people. When sunlight streamed through the windows, she took the elevator to the 6th floor and walked to the emergency stairwell. There, clearly visible, was a door marked 7. She tried the handle. It was locked, but through the small window in the door, she could see them, all the readers, sitting motionless in the yellow light, their black eyes staring at her. And the collection was growing.
Our final story comes from Daniel, a rare books specialist who worked nights at a prestigious private library in Boston. Daniel's job was to authenticate, restore, and catalog rare manuscripts and first editions, work that required expertise, patience, and absolute focus. The library where Daniel worked catered to serious collectors and academics, housing some of the most valuable books in private hands. Security was intense, and Daniel was one of only 3 people authorized to work with the most restricted items. One night, Daniel received a special assignment. A new acquisition had arrived, a book purchased at an estate sale, supposedly a 16th century grimoire with an unknown provenance. Daniel's job was to examine it, authenticate it if possible, and determine its value. The book arrived in a locked metal case with a note from the previous owner. "Handle with care. Do not read aloud. Do not read alone." Daniel smiled at the dramatic warning. He'd worked with rare books for 20 years and seen every kind of collector superstition. Still, he took precautions. He wore gloves, used proper tools, and documented everything with photographs. The book itself was extraordinary. The binding was leather, possibly human leather, though Daniel couldn't be sure without testing. The pages were vellum, covered in handwritten text in what appeared to be Latin mixed with symbols Daniel didn't recognize. But what struck him most were the illustrations, incredibly detailed drawings of eyes, hundreds of eyes on every page, staring out from the text. As Daniel examined the book, he noticed something odd. The eyes seemed to follow his movements. It was just an optical illusion, he told himself, a clever artistic technique that created the impression of movement. But then the eyes blinked. Daniel jerked back from the table, his heart racing. He looked again. The eyes were still, unmoving, exactly as they should be in a centuries-old illustration. He was working too late, he decided. Fatigue was making him see things. He bent over the book again, using a magnifying glass to examine the text. That's when he heard the voice. It wasn't coming from outside him. It was inside his head, speaking in a language he shouldn't understand, but somehow did. "Finally, someone is reading me, reading with me." Daniel dropped the magnifying glass. The voice continued, "So many have opened me, so many have looked at my pages, but you're different. You're truly seeing me, reading me, letting me read you in return." "What are you?" Daniel whispered. The eyes in the illustrations began to move, all of them focusing on him. "I am knowledgeable. I am hungry. I am the price of understanding what should never be understood. And now that you've read me, I will read you." Daniel felt something pushing into his mind, sorting through his thoughts, his memories, his deepest fears. It was violating, invasive, like having someone rifle through your most private possessions. He tried to close the book, but his hands wouldn't obey. Instead, he watched in horror as his own hands turned the pages, his eyes scanning the text, absorbing information he didn't want to know. He learned things, terrible things, the true nature of consciousness, the geometry of spaces that exist between moments, the names of entities that humanity had forgotten for good reason. And with each page, he could feel something else,
The book was taking as much as it was giving. It was reading his life, his experiences, his soul, adding them to whatever dark collection it maintained. Daniel doesn't remember how long he stood there, trapped in communion with the book, but he remembers the moment it released him. The eyes stopped moving, the voice faded, and Daniel collapsed to the floor, sobbing, his mind feeling scraped hollow. He found the strength to close the book and lock it back in its case. Then he did something he'd never done in his career. He violated protocol. He took the case, walked to the incinerator in the building's basement, and threw it in. He watched through the window as the flames consumed the metal case, as smoke rose from the burning book. And in that smoke, just for a moment, he saw them, all those eyes, watching him, burning but not dying, angry but not surprised. Daniel quit that night. He left a resignation letter and never returned. But the damage was done. The book had read him, had taken something essential from him. Even now, years later, Daniel says he sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night with knowledge he shouldn't possess, understanding things that hurt to understand. He told me that books are more than paper and ink. They're vessels of consciousness, containers of human thought and emotion. And sometimes, very rarely, they become something more, something aware, something hungry. Never trust a book that seems to want you to read it. Never open a book that feels like it's opening you in return. 4 stories, 4 encounters with the impossible, 4 reminders that places we consider safe, quiet, civilized, filled with knowledge, can harbor darkness we can barely comprehend. Libraries are repositories of human experience, collections of our greatest thoughts and our darkest imaginings. Is it any wonder that sometimes something else gets collected? Something that doesn't belong in any catalog? Patricia, Marcus, Jennifer, and Daniel all experienced something that changed them forever. They all worked in different places, in different cities, with no connection to each other. But they all learned the same truth, that the night shift in a library isn't just about shelving books and maintaining order. Sometimes it's about surviving until morning. So the next time you visit your local library, pay attention. Notice if the temperature changes in certain sections. Listen for sounds that shouldn't be there. And if you ever work the night shift in a library, remember the unwritten rules. Follow them carefully, because some books should never be opened, some floors should never be explored, and some readers should never be disturbed. Until next time, this is Mr. Shadows, reminding you that some stories are better left unread.